evening. I'd like to call the Special Services Committee meeting to order at 6:09. First item on our agenda is the approval of September 16, 2021 Special Services minutes.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2, enrollment data. Dr. McDonald?
So we're looking at first we'll look at the class sizes, and the only class right now that we are not accepting any more students into are the 4th grade classes at William Allen. So if we get new students, they either go to McClellan or Gonick, depending on where the space is and where they live. Right now there's 24 in each of those sections, which is down from the 28 that we started with, so that was good news. Looking at the overall enrollment, our enrollment is down K through 12 and PK through 12, 128 students. So we were digging into that to see where those 128 students are. We have 68 students that have moved to home ed. And of those 68, we can't really track how many are in VLAX because VLAX is so delayed. So some of them just moved to home ed until they could get into VLAX. But right now we can't figure out how many that is. Heidi ran a report and found that there are currently 50 students enrolled, but that could include students that are taking multiple courses, an AP class, for example. Yeah. So I looked at the summer moves, how many kids moved out of district over the summer. We had 236 kids that left Rochester over the summer. 9 of them graduated, did summer graduation. 70 transferred outside of the state or country. We had 2 that dropped out, 13 that went to a non-public school, 99 that moved to another district in New Hampshire, 38 that transferred over the summer to home ed, 1 that was moved to a state institution, which could be YPC or another facility, and 7 that we withdraw them after they can't be located. So they weren't able to be located over the summer and have not come to school. So it's possible that they moved and that they didn't enroll in another school because they're doing a home ed program somewhere else. So we had 236 that moved, and we're only down 128, so that means that we got some that came. So it always seems to balance out throughout the year. We go up and down. It's pretty transient in New Hampshire.
Any questions? Mr.
So you mentioned VLAX waiting list?
There's no waiting list.
Okay.
It's just depending on when they enroll, and so they have to fill out, when they're transferring to VLAX as a full-time student, they have to fill out the application, submit it, and a lot of times they miss a step, so, but that becomes the VLAX people will work with them to get them fully enrolled. So once they submit, if they're intending to enroll full-time in VLAX, they submit a home ed letter. So they're included in the home ed, but oftentimes those kids will end up transferring into VLAX.
So once they're in VLAX, then they're counted as one of our students?
No,
No.
these are kids that are transferring full-time into
Full-time,
VLAX.
okay. All right.
Yeah, Mr. O'Connor.
Do we have a matrix, so if a child starts off at VLAX and transitions back to, say, Spalding High School, how those credits will transfer?
We
and
do.
what the impact is on that?
Yes, yeah, we do. They have our competencies and are aligned to them, so they'll transfer. We'll have that. They have a grade report actually that splits out the competencies, and then the high school guidance counselor can look to see what they have. I think for the most part it's pretty much one-to-one. Yeah, I don't remember ever not having a student fulfill their competency requirements through VLAX. I think we pretty much are aligned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Watson.
So do you know how many of our students are in VLAX full-time?
Full-time?
Yeah, that
Do you
were
know?
Rochester students.
I mean, I pulled a report of 50, but that could be just a class here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering how
We'd
many.
have to, I don't know, I don't know if VLAX would be able to give that to us or not. We could ask them, yeah. We got a report from the state last week, and it was the new scholarship fund report, and it gave us a breakdown of how many students from Rochester are enrolled in different schools, and that's what prompted us to see where are these kids. So there was a large number of VLAX students on there that a lot of them are still attending school here. there was some EFA students that are still enrolled full-time here, so that was the report that we had to go in and say, no, these students are not, they're applying for the scholarship, but they're actually still full-time students, so. I think the state, the Department of Ed is still trying to wrap around how they're gonna manage that process without people, double dipping.
Doing that for years.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Any other questions under enrollment? Okay, item 3, bus data.
So busing continues to be a daily challenge in every school district in the country, I think. So we had collapsed 19. Route 19 went into, did they go to 13, Mrs. Perkins? I don't remember which one they went to, but we did that on the 13th of September, and I think I presented at the last meeting. Most recently, we had to collapse Route 17, and that was on the 18th of October, and those students moved to R6, R7, and R9. And we had to collapse Route 5, and those students moved to 2, 4, 15, and 18. We do have one driver that's coming through. It's a long process because the background checks are taking just so long. So they'll have to do the background check, finish the training program, and then we can get them on the road. As always, if you know anyone that's looking for a part-time job that wants to be a bus driver. Yeah.
Have we considered putting advertisements on the various school marker signs and whatnot?
There was something that had just recently gone out. There was a notification that I know STA they have buses parked with banners on them, and there was something that was on a marquee. I think that Mrs. Perkins recommended that they call the city and asked to put it on their marquee as well.
I remember when we were looking for custodians, putting it on the front of the high school on their sign was.
So the only problem is that we don't actually employ the drivers, it's STA. So we have to just be careful about advertising for outside entities, but we're doing our best to help them. And we've tried to see if they could get us drivers from other barns that they have, and they're just short everywhere, unfortunately.
Any questions or comments about bus data?
Just what the impact on the students have been in collapsing the bus routes?
So those are middle high school routes, and they are still arriving on time, and there's enough space on the bus for them. So that's what we're watching, if the bus gets too full, if no more kids can fit on it. The middle high school is only 2 to a seat, so it hasn't been as much of an issue with elementary because they're 3 to a seat, or they can be 3 to a seat. We have them at 2, but they could go up. But so that's why we're watching the middle high school, just because they're bigger kids and they take up more space.
Mr. Commuter.
If I may, is there a possibility, and I know other parts of the country do this, but using public transportation, i.e., if in fact, we're not necessarily at crisis with bus, but we're close to,
Yep.
and the next step may be Massachusetts.
Manchester does that.
Call
Manchester
it in the guard, but,
coordinates public transportation with their busing. The hard time that they have, a friend of mine is their transportation coordinator, is the public transportation buses run on a very tight schedule.
Right.
So when you're transferring kids from one to another, you often have kids stranded at a bus stop. But, it wouldn't be an option for elementary school students, but perhaps at
Understand,
the high school level.
right,
Yeah.
in reallocating resources where needed,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be prudent at the elementary, but at the high school levels,
Yeah.
you
We do have, there's a stop right out here. So-
if STA or whoever,
Yeah,
start having conversations with Coast or
yeah,
You know,
it's a good idea.
to at least come up with a plan.
Yeah, just in case.
If needed, because
Yeah, she
the
called.
problem's not going away.
It's not, and one morning she called and she said, we're not gonna run this route anymore. I'm like, that's not really an option.
Well,
Yeah.
and we contract with them,
Yeah.
so under our contract with them, they
Yeah, they
have to
do,
fulfill it in some regard.
well, what they've been doing is decreasing our bill. Yeah, but, and that's what she said. I said, no, we have to, she said, well, we just don't have anyone. I said, well, then we've got to figure something out, because not giving the kids a ride to school is not an option.
Shift that street to Dover?
Yeah, we did, that's why we collapsed those, yeah. Those kids are gonna go to Dover now, yeah, so.
Or what about the National Guard, reaching out to them?
Well,
think that
right, the
would be done
Massachusetts
on
option, if you will.
Was that the governor that?
The
The
National
governor
Guard,
did it
Yeah.
under the guard,
Yeah.
yeah.
In our sports, we don't have buses running anymore for sports, it's all private
Private.
transportation.
Oh, it is, even for football?
Yeah,
It's the early sports that are the problem. If the buses can get kids and bring them to their games after they do the elementary runs, we just don't have extra buses to do the 2 o'clock and 2:30 pickups from the high school. So if it's a later sport, they can still catch a bus. It's the early ones that they can't do.
So late weekend games, you know, so.
Well, like football plays at night, right? So
Yeah.
they're probably
Saturdays.
okay, yeah.
Like the band had a bus for,
But JV and freshman football play in the afternoons on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Is that why there's so many night games for soccer lately?
I don't know. I think that's a question for Mr. Hebert. I can certainly find out.
all right. Item 4 is attendance data. In our packet.
Attendance. So we had, just this week, we had our first 2 students that crested 20 days absent. And so Mrs. McLean actually is doing home visits for those 2 students. Our attendance percentages are actually up at Gonick, which is great. Or, no, I'm sorry, they were up at a different school. They're up at McClellan. They're also up at Nancy Loud, but they're mostly staying in the 90%. I did check with the state's attendance data, so I could answer, you had asked a question about that. Their attendance data that they post is actually a year behind because they collect it in arrears. And they don't report that until their school district report card comes out, which is in December. So I asked a few other of my colleagues, and they were hesitant to give me attendance numbers because they're not keeping attendance numbers. Because of COVID, they're encouraging people to stay home if they're sick, and they're not counting them as absent. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of comparative data for other districts, but our numbers look pretty good for us.
Any questions or comments?
Just if I may, I mean, you mentioned other districts that are not encouraging kids to come to school if they have COVID, which I
Right,
assume
or
we are
if
doing.
they have any symptoms, yeah, and we do the same.
We are doing that too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I did have a dad that called last week, and he was very concerned about his son being marked unexcused because, you know, he wasn't feeling well and he had these symptoms, and I said, no, I can assure you that he will be able to get all of his work and he will not be unexcused. Yeah, we want people to stay home and get better if they're not feeling well.
We had a childcare phone call today, and one of the childcares up north got a call from Dartmouth Medical Center, wanting to know why they have to keep seeing the same kids with the same symptoms over and over, and why can't childcares do what schools do? And she said, well, what would that be? And he said, well, you send the child to the RN. And she said, oh, you're going to give us all RNs?
Right, yeah.
You know, childcare doesn't have nurses.
Yeah.
At least you have the nurses in the schools to say, yeah, this kid doesn't need to be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Which is a good, you know.
And I met with the high school nurse last week, and she was funny because, you know, this is her first year at the high school. She was at a different school last year. And she said, I know the kids now. I know the one that just wants to go home and the ones that are really sick. So, yeah, she
And
was
that don't
funny.
want to go home.
That don't want to go home, that you say,
Don't
no, you
wanna
have to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was pretty funny.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Just the Bud Carlson percentage, is that above average for us?
It is.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
It's been very quiet there, too.
Yeah, which
The
is,
year has been,
well, I'm really impressed with the senior
yes,
percentage.
Yeah.
yes.
All right, any other questions or comments? Okay. Next item is the item 5, 5-year plan.
So we're still working with special ed. I know Sarah's been looking at some of the tuition agreements that we have, and seeing if she can do better with some of those, and make perhaps some different placements, looking at students that are placed out, if they're placed out for an appropriate reason, or if it's a student that, that should come back. We have some 504 students that are coming back to us, which is great. And working, again, Sarah and Dustin and I, on looking at how we can use some grant funding, collapse some grant funding together to create some of the programs that we spend a lot of money on out-of-district placement for, and how we can accommodate those in district. But it's a lengthy process. And she will be here next month to give you an update.
Great.
Thank you. Item 6, public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the committee? Okay, there being none, we'll close public comment. Item 7, other. Does anyone have anything for other? Okay, item 8, adjournment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?